unsure of me.
Yeah.
You know, because I was sort of a loose cannon.
Yeah.
I didn't have much to lose, and they were friends of mine. And I was offered by Dick Hamer. You know, he was the Premier. He wanted to know if I'd be a police informant.
Good evening, Australia. Welcome to the show. This show's called Tough Times Never Last, but Tough People Do. And my name's Michael Kuzilny. It's got a history of about 8 years. We've had some amazing people on the couch, people who've spent lifetimes behind bars, people who've had several months to live. They've had, terminal diseases, people who've had houses blown up by the underworld, had their whole families killed. But all of those people have become more resilient, and what I like about the people on the couch, all very authentic, no masks. I'm 50 now, but when I was 18, 19, 20, I worked, couldn't get a job, so I ended up getting into the police force. First a troublemaker down Frankston, used to end up in court all the time for driving offences, and somehow in those days I got onto the Victoria Police Force. 12 weeks was the academy in those days, wasn't too difficult. I almost got kicked out a couple of times, but yes, it progressed to the police force, then criminal defence lawyer, 30 years plus behind this strange criminal justice system. But I met Trevor tonight, who lived and worked in St Kilda for more than 20 years, and I worked there as a cop in the 80s. Let's talk about St Kilda.
We probably crossed paths a couple of times.
Yeah. But I was more the non-judgmental cop, you know.
Yeah.
I was just happy to have a job.
Yeah.
Whereas you were driving prostitutes around, drug dealers.
Yep.
So, tell us about your life, Trev. You're 76 now, you look about 50.
No, yeah.
Between the two of us, we've got 120 years of life experience.
Yeah. Well, I had a marriage breakup. I had a normal life until I was 40. I had the usual thing, bought 2 houses.
What's normal?
Bringing up your kids, having a house, moving up, getting a better house, ended up in Deborah Hills. And
what were you doing for work?
At that stage, I was just doing a lot of different things. I worked in the railways, the post office.
So you were a hard-working family?
Yeah, I've always worked all my life. Yeah, from the age of 10, I used to sell newspapers. So I've always worked all my life.
Where'd you grow up?
282 Murray Street, South Melbourne. That's where I first started. Yeah.
And then when the marriage crumbled, hit you hard, yeah?
Well, it hit me really bad. I was shattered, and I went down to St Kilda, and I ended up driving cabs, and all of a sudden my lifestyle completely changed. I'd become listening to people with more troubles than mine. My very first fare was a young girl, and I'm talking to her, and she said she's going to score. And I said, why? And she said, no one cares. And I said, well, I care, you know what I mean? And that was sort of the beginning of it. And then I met a lot of the girls, we've become friends. I had no sexual drive at all of those days.
No, how many prostitutes did you have sort of sex with over those years?
Oh, in the 20s probably. Yeah.
Was
That's
it
over
good?
20 years.
I mean, you know, and there's always so much taboo talk about sex workers, drugs, you know. But you know, you can imagine this man probably close to being so lonely, and he's out in the streets working, you know. Yeah. And you just needed some love, didn't you?
Yeah, it was love and affection, and that's what they needed too.
Yeah.
And nearly every street girl will tell you how they were abused when they were young. That's usually the story.
Did you pay them, or was it sort of
yeah.
sometimes for services rendered?
No, it was mainly paying for it.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are still friends to this day.
I've got a mate.
Yeah.
He went through a very difficult time, and he got hooked on working girls. You know.
Yeah.
That was his. He said rather than go on drugs or alcohol, he started being with prostitutes.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
A lot of people condemn you. They think, oh, you've been using the girls up, but it's not really that at all. A lot of them are really good friends of mine. And they still are. After 20 years, I'm still friends with a couple of them.
That's amazing.
And I've actually delivered 2 of the babies of the working girls.
Isn't that beautiful? Congratulations.
Yeah.
and folks, that's so true, isn't it? It's such a judgmental society. We haven't got all the big houses and the happy families inside, you know. Sometimes the people in St Kilda, for example, a lot of lonely people, you know. Some are suffering, some are broken, some are prostitutes, some are drug addicts, but, you know, They all feel lonely, so if they can support each other. I remember as a young cop, I met this 15-year-old girl, many 15-year-old girls from the King's Cross, you know. They were working there, and, you know, I was a young cop. I didn't really want to charge anybody, but the sergeant says, Mick, go out there and charge them for loitering for prostitution. I think I did it once or twice, but after that I'm thinking, these girls are on drugs. They had a shit father who beat up the mother, and they're here to sleep with dirty, sleazy men so they can feed their heroin habit. You know, why make it worse and take them to court and, you know, get them locked up? You know, sometimes we just have to show compassion even as law enforcers or lawmakers or adjudicators, don't we?
Oh, exactly.
We should show compassion and not be so bloody judgmental.
But there is so much money around now, but it's the rich have got so much money, the poor have got nothing.
Yeah.
And in my day, you didn't have people sleeping in the streets. It's a phenomenon to me. Why are people working living in the streets? I've worked all my life. I've worked over 100 jobs. I've always worked. There is work there. I do a bit of gardening now to make money. And there's always work if you want to push it. But if you take a background of a child who's been abused, incest and all that, you kill something in them, and they do not expand. They stay the same.
God bless them.
And there's nowhere to go. The Larundle's gone, Mont Park's gone. All these places that used to look after them, they were closed, and they were made into housing places where they put nice houses. So they let these people wander the streets.
In the days of the 80s, I remember we used to be in a flat there across the road in Fitzroy Street, you know, and watch all the drug deals go down. And
that's right, yeah.
A lot of taxi drivers were dealing out of the boot, you know, big time.
That's
you know?
right, yeah.
And we were just sort of watching, and every now and then, you know, I mean, you get all the small dealers, but quite often you get the big dealers, you know.
Yeah.
Did you ever get involved in the drugs?
Personally, no, never used drugs in my life, no.
But you met many drug dealers?
Oh, many drug dealers. And there was a cafe over the road was St Kilda Cafe.
Oh, yes.
And there was
all the coppers used to get free hamburgers there, you know. They always got their free hamburgers,
well, I'll tell you,
free smokes, and you know, I'm not trying to brag, but I never took anything for free.
No.
There's no free lunches, you know. But it'd be funny that they'd be grabbing all the free stuff, you know, hamburgers, this, that, drinks, smokes, and then they'd go in there and bloody drag all the people out and...
except one.
Beat them up. Who?
There was a lady there, I won't mention her name, and she was selling drugs from the same seat for 7 years.
Yeah.
And a very funny thing is, what happened when in those days it had an alkaline base. So you get a spoon and you put it in and you get a match and you light it underneath and then you shoot up.
We might talk about that cafe after the next break, but it's Tough Times Never Last. We'll be back shortly. And thank you very much for watching. Yeah, I think back sometimes, you know, I was rapt to join the police force, you know, from a bloke who wasn't really going anywhere in life. I all of a sudden had the uniform, you know. Mick Miller, the commissioner, said, what do you want to do? And I wanted to get into the special operations group, you know, take out all the terrorists and stuff, but I was never fit enough. But I remember St Kilda was quite disgraceful. There was a place called the Gatwick, which was sort of a halfway house, and you know, we'd get called there every 2 weeks, and the neighbours would say, oh, there's a smell coming from the door, you know. And we'd break down the door, and you know, the bodies would be bloated, you know, they'd be blue and everything, and you try to lift them, and a lot of times they'd explode, you know, and there'd be the smell of death all over you, you know. And I remember the undertakers used to come, and they used to laugh, but I used to throw up, you know. And I said, you take the body to the morgue. They said, no, regulations are you coppers have to follow us, you know. But I remember coming back smelling of death, and that smell of death would linger in your system for about 2 weeks, you know. I'd be throwing up in the car on the way to work. But they're the sort of things that we remember. And you must have seen all that. Tell us some of the...
well, there was a girl called Mandy Sue. And I don't know
the drug dealer.
No, well, Danielle, she wouldn't care because, she used to sell drugs there for 7 years in the same seat.
At the St Kilda Cafe?
At the St Kilda Cafe. And what they were doing, they used to have a spoon when you shoot up, okay? So what would happen, the guy got sick of using all the spoons, so he drilled a hole through them. So everyone took them as a souvenir. So they were still taking the spoons away all the time. And you were talking about death. And there was a girl called Mandy Sue, and I don't know what her real name was, but she was always high on Mandrax tablets. And she used to mirror walk down the street. She'd be holding the window to keep momentum and balance. And that's how she used to walk, and that's how she got the name. And the police come up to her one day and they said, look, we've found a body, could you identify the body? And she said, yeah, you know, because of the girls, a lot of them want to help the police in different circumstances. And they went to a garage and the body was there and they turned it over and all maggots fell out of the face. And that was it. And she died later of a drug overdose, as a lot of them did in those days, yeah.
And isn't it funny, folks, everyone thinks the lawmakers are always straight down the line, got the uniform, the badge and the gun, but that St Kilda Cafe I remember very well. I was saying before, everyone used to go there and get all the freebies, you know. In the 80s there's a lot of free stuff, a lot of corruption, you know, but everybody knew, oh yeah, they're dealing heroin in there, you know, like that lady was sitting there all the time. I went there only a couple of weeks ago to have a hamburger and they said, oh, Michael, have you been here before? I said, yeah, many years ago. I said, people used to sell a lot of drugs from your cafe. And they go, ooh. People don't like talking about the real shit, do they?
No, and there were bullet holes in the wall.
Huh?
There were always bullet holes in the wall they had there for years. And one guy got kneecapped in there with a gun. They come in and shot him in the kneecaps. So he was a dealer, yeah.
The cops did it?
No, the cops didn't do it, but he was just a dealer, but he upset someone, so they banged into the knees, and that was it. Yeah, there's a lot of payback.
And we never want to put down police because I'm proud of the members who, you know,
I've seen police in tears.
Yeah.
Because they weren't able to do something.
No, but they used to shoot people in the knees.
Oh yeah.
And grab money from you know, all the
that was
hotels
common.
and stuff,
They
and
used to
get
take
the free
money,
grog.
yeah.
So let's not.
But there were a lot of good coppers as well.
There was.
Yeah.
Because people never realise that our drug squad, that, you know, 80% of our drug squad all went to jail for selling drugs. They became drug traffickers, from law enforcement to criminals. So where there's power, there's always corruption, yeah?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Now, folks, my first year in the Victoria Police, I was squad 14 of 86. My register number was 25591. I was doing city traffic, directing traffic, as young coppers have to do. And we got a call to Holland Street, 1987. 17 people were killed by a scumbag called Julian Knight. I wrote a book about this, A Life in Crime, and it was the August the 7th, 1987. Knight was arrested after a shooting spree. And I remember going down there, Trevor, and seeing all the bodies, you know? You know? And there was a lady there with a child, and he shot through the window.
That's right, yeah.
And I saw a guy on a motorbike riding along. He got shot off. People running from the Holland Street railway station. This guy would blow him up. I don't know what... He had an M16 rifle.
He had a couple of rifles, I think.
But it was so horrific. And it also showed me, folks, the sleaziness of people. I remember that we had to block off the streets and there was crime scenes everywhere, you know. There's quite a few bodies. Australia's worst massacre, Hoddle Street. But people were whinging and complaining. I was a young cop trying to wait for the homicide squad to come, and they're saying, you know, where's your badge number? We want to go back home. People didn't care about the death.
No, I've seen it many times, yeah.
Now Trev,
well, my son was born that day.
Your son was born that day?
Yeah, and on the way home, I was in there for, I get a bit emotional.
Yeah, sure.
And when he missed me by 5 minutes, I'd gone past, had a pizza and he'd killed everyone, and I thought, I'm going to get this bastard. So I set out to try to bring him down, and I wrote to him as a friend, and then I had the letters published and hoping that he'd be called a give up. And I was, you know, because my son would have been brought up without a father. So I was very vengeful on it.
So simplified and clarified, Trev, I didn't quite get it. I'm sure some of the viewers didn't get it.
Yeah.
You wrote to him.
Yeah.
Because you wanted to get him.
Yeah.
Why did you want to get him?
Because my son wouldn't have had a father if I had been 5 minutes earlier.
Oh, so you drove through that
Just before it, yeah.
So you saw the bodies as well?
No, this is before it actually happened.
Before it happened, and you heard afterwards?
I stopped for a pizza and he'd already killed the people.
So your son was born. Congratulations.
Yeah.
So how old's your son now?
He's 28, yeah.
So it happened 28 years ago?
Yeah.
Gee, I'm getting old.
Yeah.
28 years ago?
Yeah.
And he's still in prison, isn't he? Julian?
Oh, yeah, he'll never get out.
No.
As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a story that he killed a lot of people, and there was a family that had paid a contract out on him. If he ever walks out, they'll kill him. And that's pretty factual from what I know of the people.
Yeah, it wasn't the best trip in the police force. I mean, there were some good times, you know, walking around and sort of helping people. And but Hoddle Street, that wasn't a very good introduction to death. Or the Gatwick pulling out dead bodies that exploded. And then later on, I thought I'll go somewhere a little bit more quiet. And that poor Denyer, he ended up killing 5 girls. Slicing them up and yeah, that was another crazy story. But
he started in Frankston. Yeah,
the 80s and the 90s were quite crazy, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. There was a lot
but
of
it's still happening, isn't it? We're getting all these slimy serial killers.
Yeah, and the trouble is that there were drug dealers in those days now. Like everyone's a drug dealer now. It seems they're selling ice. They're making ice at home. Ice is so bad.
It almost makes the heroin addict like insignificant, doesn't it?
It does completely. Most heroin addicts, they're harmless. They'll steal a few.
We've seen them, haven't we?
Yeah, of course.
We've seen them in the street, and
they're really nice people.
They're nice people. They're sedated, But we might.
But ice is outrageous.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about the ice epidemic after this. We've got Trevor Donahue on the couch. What a decent fella. We'll be back shortly. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Michael Kuzilny. Trevor Donahue on the couch. Never behind bars, wasn't a drug dealer, but slept with a few working girls. Worked in with the St Kilda crew, and very non-judgmental, and seen a lot of death.
Yeah, quite a few. There was one story in particular that I walked up Grey Street, and there was a chemist on the corner, and then you go into Fitzroy Street, and there was a young guy sitting cross-legged there. And I went back a couple of hours later, he was still sitting there. He'd been dead for hours, and no one had noticed that he died of a drug overdose. No. And there was one in particular, I'll bring this up because there was a young girl down there, and her name was Peter, and she used to sniff glue, and in my mind she was murdered. And they put it down as accidental death at a drug overdose at the Gatwick. Well, she didn't use drugs. She used roofing tile glue, and she was beaten. And I heard that they stuck a needle in her leg to make out that she died of a drug overdose.
Who's that?
Her name was Peter Lamont.
And who do you think did it?
That's not for me to say.
Oh no, who do you think though? Be quite open to it.
No, I don't think I should really.
No,
because I'm judging someone. I'm only 90% sure of the facts. But I went to the police about it, and they didn't act at all.
No.
So I was quite upset about that.
Yeah. Well, it's like anywhere, isn't it? Where there's power, there's always corruption. I mean, I saw a lot of people being flogged. People had an attitude problem, and then they got an attitude adjustment. But there was always a handful of guys who'd beat up on the crooks. But you couldn't say anything because otherwise you would get into serious trouble. There was other Sunday mornings as a young cop I used to come to work, and you'd go to the illegal brothels, and they'd rob a bloke who just had sex with a prostitute at an illegal brothel, and they'd say, "Here we go, Mick, here's half the money," and I'd say, "Oh no, thank you," but you had to watch yourself because even in those days, anything could happen,
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of decent hard workers who progressed on with their careers, and the ones who didn't, the shonky ones who beat up on people and stole and took lines of cocaine on the table, ended up in higher positions, but then committed crimes. And we've seen these people in the media doing, years behind bars. But the cops in St Kilda in those days it was a tough police force, wasn't it? There was a lot of beatings. You saw that.
A lot of beatings, yeah. I was threatened a few times, but not many, because I think they were unsure of me.
Yeah.
Because I was sort of a loose cannon.
Yeah.
I didn't have much to lose, and they were friends of mine, and I was offered by Dick Hamer. He was the Premier. He wanted to know if I'd be a police informer.
Yeah.
So, no, I just stayed middle of the road.
There was a lot of police informants.
Oh, yeah.
I remember there was even a prostitute one time, folks. One of the sergeants there at St Kilda was having sex with a prostitute on a regular basis so she wouldn't get charged, and she actually had a listening device, and it was quite embarrassing when we used to call them the toe cutters. The internal investigations came to the police and played all the tapes, when he was having sex with her after the shift, but he got into a bit of strife. Yeah, in those days, a lot of stuff was swept under the carpet.
Yeah, a young friend of mine recently, she's working on the street, and the same thing happened. One of the policemen come up and he said, "I won't charge you if you give me a head job."
Yeah,
and
happened a lot.
Yeah, well, it's still happening. Yeah,
happening still.
Yeah, this is recently. Yeah.
Because before they weren't so accountable, you know.
No.
I remember when even I was working, you'd always have your 8 special cokes on a Friday or Saturday night before you even started charging crooks, you know. You'd have 8 special cokes, this much bourbon. There was a bar called Fritz Bar, you know, and it was completely new to me, all this lifestyle, but I'd be shit-faced by the time, 1.5 hours into the shift. Not all the time, but working with certain cowboys, and you'd be intoxicated, you know. And then you'd end up sleeping at the station and doing the whole thing over again, you know. But even though, because you're young and you needed a job and you saw all that corruption, you couldn't really say anything.
No. Well, the policemen's wages weren't very high.
No.
And drug dealers were making tremendous money. So you can imagine, they'd slip them $1,000 or something like that. So you can imagine how they would become bent.
Well, that's right. Sometimes they grab blokes and for a bit of exchange of money, throw the drugs away and
And I used to work for a while at the Windsor Castle Hotel, and I'm not a big guy, but I used to be able to fight. And we used to have the worst trouble was off-duty coppers. They used to come in all the time drunk and want free drinks and things like that, and that was it was really, they were a bloody nuisance.
The old Freddie, and a lot of coppers watching or ex-coppers remember the old Freddie. It certainly caused a lot of trouble, didn't it? A lot of trouble, free drinks, free this, but there's no free lunches.
Yeah.
Trevor Donahue. Are you happy now at 76?
Oh, yep.
Yeah? Where are you living now?
I'm back in South Melbourne. I've got my Rottweiler and my 2 cats.
Got a good woman by your side, or?
No.
No?
I just have different girlfriends, yeah.
Good.
Because I'm scared of commitment.
Yeah, still?
And I'm quite happy. I've got a...
Good on you. You're a nice bloke, Trevor.
I think so.
Nice bloke.
I have my moments, yeah.
Yeah. And you're helping with, you're helping on the streets as well?
Not that much, but I know Father Bob, and there are certain things down there that I am helping a little bit.
Isn't it amazing, though?
Yeah.
There's so many selfish people, and it's all about them. And so many people hear about Father Bob because he's one of the few people who's selfless and has been helping people for over 45 years, but there's not many.
But they stretch him so thin, everyone wants a bit of Father Bob. I know Father Bob, and they do stretch him really thin.
Many people, folks, it's all about them. It's about my degree, my parents, my car, my job, my money in my back pocket, Stop being so selfish and actually reach out to others and show a bit of kindness after watching the show. That's my advice. We're becoming more selfish as a society.
I think we are too. Yeah. It's a throwaway society. I've furnished my house with what people throw away.
They're all collecting for their house. I see it all the time now.
Yeah.
Then I'm 50, they shake hands like this. They go, "How you going? What's your name? Where do you live? What model is your Merc,
Yeah.
I just say, piss off and talk to me about real things,
Well, I was brought up in South Melbourne when I was young. I knew every person who lived in that street. We knew everyone. I don't think they had nursing homes because we used to look after the elderly.
The sense of community is gone.
Yeah, that's gone completely.
And I know a lot of people hang shit on Indian taxi drivers and stuff, but I always talk to them. They're beautiful people, and there's such a sense of community there in where they come from, isn't
right,
it?
Yeah.
Extended families. It's not all about the money. Trevor Donahue, thank you for coming in. God bless you, mate.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work on the streets.
Yeah.
And if you're going through some difficult issues, keep up the tough times, keep up the resilience. We'll be back next week, and love to see you again.